Prince Harry breaks down in court, saying one newspaper made his family's life a nightmare.
Was that they used unlawful tactics and phone hacking to get information on him.
The Duke of Sussex became emotional in court overnight, where he was giving evidence on day 3 of his claim against the publishers of the Daily Mail.
Prince Harry became visibly emotional, accusing Associated Newspapers Limited of making his wife's life what he described an absolute misery.
The Duke accused the publisher of the Daily Mail of wanting to drive him to drugs and drinking by putting his life under surveillance.
Dig up material that they say wrecked their lives. You reference Prince Harry saying he was paranoid.
Changing the culture of the media in this country is his life's work. This is not about financial gain.
Prince Harry has found himself in some hot water, well, not that hot, lukewarm maybe, after court documents reveal he sent flirty messages to a reporter.
Today is a great day for truth, as well as accountability.
In other texts, Griffiths referred to Harry as Mr. Mischief, called him H-bomb, and wrote that "We missed you so much" at a friend's house.
The sweet talk also suggests Harry and the reporter were much closer than he admitted in court.
The relationship is so fractious at the moment, I think, especially given the nature of this court case.
And what I would say is my first assessment of it, he was very much angry, very much frustrated.
He also did not cut off contact with her when he said he did. So his argument's been completely blown out the water.
He contradicts himself somewhat later on in his testimony, acknowledging that complaining often makes matters worse.
Well, I think in the case of these messages, we're assuming that they're genuine. This was a Facebook exchange. I think it's exposed him as a terrible liar.
A courtroom in London, 11 weeks of testimony, barristers in wigs, stacks of legal filings, and somewhere buried inside all of it, in a series of private messages that nobody expected to become the story. Not the lawyers, not the journalists covering the trial. And almost certainly not Harry himself. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. Because what emerged from Harry's privacy trial against Associated Newspapers wasn't just about phone hacking. It wasn't just about tabloids and settlements and legal strategy and the long, bitter war between a prince and the British press. It was about who Harry actually is. Behind the documentaries, behind the speeches, behind the carefully constructed image of a man who walked away from everything, the titles, the palace, the institution, for love, for truth, for a better life. That image has been Harry's greatest asset, and Charlotte Griffiths just put a crack in it. To understand why these messages matter, you have to understand what Harry was trying to prove in that courtroom. He filed this lawsuit to establish that he was a victim, that the British press had violated his privacy for years, systematically, deliberately, without conscience. That information about his relationships, his movements, his private conversations, could not have been obtained through any legitimate means. That was the argument. That was the foundation everything else was built on. Associated Newspapers pushed back hard. Their defense was pointed and specific. Harry wasn't as private as he claimed. He had journalists inside his social circle. He was friendly with them. He reached out to them. He handed them access. And to prove it, they entered Charlotte Griffiths' messages into evidence. The messages date to December 2011 and January 2012. This is before Cressida Bonus, before Meghan, before the move to California, and the Netflix deal and the memoir that shook the monarchy. This is Harry at 30-something, post-Chelsea Davy, moving through London's social scene with the ease of someone who has never had to introduce himself at a party. He added Griffiths on Facebook during a gathering at the home of their mutual friend, Arthur Landon. Then he sent her his phone number directly. "It's H," he wrote, "in case you were confused by name and picture." That's where it started. What followed was something that doesn't happen between near strangers. A string of exchanges, playful, warm, textured, with the kind of shorthand that only develops over time. Griffiths called him Mr. Mischief. Harry called her Sugar. He referenced their movie snuggles. He signed off with moi and a trail of kisses. He told her she'd missed a good party. He said he wished he could have been at Arthur's. Especially now that you're there. In January 2012, Harry wrote that he would have been drinking her under the table and signed off with "Miss our movie snuggles" and 3 sets of kisses. These were not the messages of someone who had met a person once. Harry's version of events told a completely different story. He testified that he had only met Griffiths one time, at that party with Arthur Landon, and that he cut off contact the moment he found out she was a journalist. He said none of his friends knew what she did for a living. He framed the entire relationship as a brief, unknowing encounter with someone who turned out to be exactly the kind of person he'd been warned about. Charlotte Griffiths disputed this directly on the record. She testified that she and Harry knew each other socially for a time, that her friends, the very people who introduced her to the prince, were fully aware she worked as deputy diary editor at the Mail on Sunday, under royal correspondent Katie Nicklin. She said Harry himself sent her his number while he was hosting at Arthur Landon's home. She said the last time she and Harry met socially was June 2012. 6 months after these messages were exchanged. Phone records shown in court placed the two in contact at 2:50 in the morning. One of them is not telling the truth about what this was. Here's what Charlotte Griffiths confirmed. Not as opinion, not as speculation, not as tabloid chatter, but on the record, under oath, inside a London High Court. She and Harry had a friendship, a real one, warm enough for pet names and inside jokes and late-night messages and talk of weekends in the countryside getting up to naughtiness. And she was a working journalist at the Mail on Sunday the entire time. This is where the story starts to take on a different weight, because the lawsuit was never just about legal strategy. For Harry, it was always personal. It was about his identity, his history, his right to say, "The press did this to me, and I never gave them anything." These messages complicate that. And that complication runs deeper than the courtroom. Think about what Harry has built his public persona on since stepping back from royal duties. The Netflix documentary, the Oprah interview, the memoir. Every platform, every interview, every carefully worded statement has returned to the same core idea: that Harry was targeted, surveilled, and violated by a press he never trusted and never engaged with. That's the story Meghan entered. That's the man she says she chose. Across social media since these messages emerged, one question kept surfacing. Quietly at first, then with more force. If Harry was friendly enough with a Mail on Sunday journalist to exchange flirty messages at 2:50 in the morning, and if he was calling her sugar and missing her movie snuggles and reminiscing about countryside weekends, then how much of the official narrative holds up? That's where things stop making sense, not because of what the messages suggest about Harry and Griffiths personally. They predate Meghan entirely, and nobody is making that argument. The timeline is clear. The issue isn't the flirtation. The issue is the testimony. Harry told the court he met her once. The messages, his own messages, sent from his own account, tell a different story. A story with nicknames and late-night calls and the kind of easy familiarity that doesn't come from a single encounter at a house party. Charlotte Griffiths didn't just submit Facebook screenshots. She submitted a version of Harry that directly contradicts what he said under oath, and that is a very different kind of problem. Observers covering the trial were quick to flag what this could mean for Harry's broader claims. His case against Associated Newspapers rests significantly on the argument that private information about him couldn't have been obtained through legitimate means. But if Griffiths, a deputy diary editor at the very paper he's suing, was genuinely embedded in his social circle, then the defense's position becomes much harder to dismiss. It doesn't prove phone hacking didn't happen. The judge will rule on that. But it does raise a serious question about whether Harry's account of his own life, his own relationships, his own boundaries with the press, can be taken at face value. And Meghan, she has been very specific about what drew her to Harry. The honesty, the directness, the sense that he had nothing to hide and no reason to perform. She's described him as unlike anyone she'd known in her previous life, someone who was real in a world built on image. The messages don't change what Harry and Meghan have together. That's not the point. But the gap between Harry's courtroom testimony and what the evidence shows, that gap matters. Because if the story he told under oath doesn't match the record, then the story he's told the public deserves the same scrutiny. Some online discussions have gone further, suggesting that this pattern of Harry's version of events not surviving contact with documentation extends well beyond the Griffiths messages, that it appears in the memoir, in the Oprah interview, in claims about conversations with family members that others have flatly denied, unconfirmed territory. But it's a conversation that hasn't gone away, because once credibility fractures in one place, people start looking at everything else. And what Charlotte Griffiths provided, calmly, specifically, on the record, and then was evidence that Harry's relationship with the truth is more complicated than his public image allows for. She didn't storm into a courtroom with an agenda. She submitted a witness statement, she answered questions, she produced messages that Harry himself sent, and let them speak. That's a quiet kind of devastation. The judgment from Mr. Justice Nicklin will tell us whether Associated Newspapers broke the law. It may arrive soon, it may take months. When it does, it will address the legal questions, the phone hacking claims, the private investigators, the alleged unlawful gathering of information. But it will not answer what's now following Harry out of that courtroom. If the messages contradict the testimony, what else does? If the man who called himself the most honest member of the royal family can be directly contradicted by his own Facebook history, what does that mean for every other version of events he's put on the record? Meghan built a life around a particular idea of who Harry is. The court documents have introduced a version of him she may not have fully seen. Stay subscribed to Royal Archives, because when that judgment drops, we'll be breaking down exactly what it means and what it still won't explain.